Welcome. Part of week 2 is taking some time to think about crafting your teaching philosophy, which is due week 3. So I figured I would stop and take a moment and talk to you about that and kind of the format for what that is. And it's not lengthy. Typically they're 2 pages in length, and that includes references. So you want to be very succinct in your writing of your teaching philosophy. You don't want to be too wordy, kind of get to the point. So let me go over a few things that you can think about as you're crafting this. So back to our triangle, the teaching, service, and scholarship triangle of higher ed. We're still in this teaching part of the triangle. And the teaching philosophy is an important part of not only what you do in your classroom and being able to articulate that, but it serves two other purposes. One, if you work in a university and you want to go up for promotion, right? So when you think about rank in higher ed, typically those with PhDs come in at either the instructor level or the assistant professor level. In order to get promoted to the next level, which would be the associate, you would need a teaching philosophy, then full professor, and then at Robert Morris we have the highest rank, which is university professor, which is not, we don't have that at all universities. And the other piece of that, so promotion is one piece. The other piece is interviewing. So when you apply for a position in higher ed as a faculty position, you have to submit your teaching philosophy along with your research agenda, which we are going to talk about a little bit later in the semester. So it does serve a purpose, and I mentioned in week 1, I want everything that we do to serve a purpose for your goals. And if one of those goals is teaching in higher ed, I want to be able to provide opportunities that you'll use beyond this class. All right, so what is the teaching philosophy? So it's really situated in some sort of conceptual or theoretical framework. So when I talked earlier about week 1 about the learning theories, this is when this will come in play. So the first bullet, a philosophical framework that really informs how you teach. It's the rationale behind what guides your practices, right? What impacts you as an educator? How does that influence your teaching? For instance, I truly believe I'm a little bit of a social constructivist in my teaching philosophy, in that I believe those relationships in the classroom are important. They're really an important part of learning, right? So having those interactions with peers. The third bullet, it really provides evidence of what you truly believe. So you want to make sure in this teaching philosophy that you cite the relevant literature that informs your teaching philosophy. And it really gives the reader an idea of what your pedagogy looks like at that particular time, which is the fourth bullet, because it's important to understand that your teaching philosophy will change over time, right? Based on your own experiences, based on success or even failure in your classroom. And it gives a window or examines your teaching practices. So I think it's an important part of letting people know before they meet you who you are as an instructor. So written for a variety of purposes. I mentioned promotional piece. Pedagogically, I think it's important that you keep track, I certainly do, of how I develop and morph as an instructor over time. And then for professional reasons. Many times, for the interview process, you need recently I edited a book, and the editor-in-chief asked if I had a teaching philosophy that they could examine. Absolutely. I had one on file from my promotion. So what should it include? So you want to make sure you think about who your audience is. So when it comes to higher ed, you want to know what's happening in that department. For instance, I'm in education. So if I were interviewing, let's say, at a large public university, I would find out who the chair of the committee was, who the members of the committee, the dean, the department head, and I would go and look at their publications and see if I can kind of figure out who they are. I would look at sample syllabi. Can I figure out pedagogically what they believe in terms of their teaching? In my world, I'm in literacy. we have this strong kind of fight between whole language and what we're now calling the science of reading, which is more phonics-based, explicit, systematic instruction. By looking at people in a reading department or an education department and see what they're publishing, right? I need to see if that aligns with who I am and what I believe, and then develop and make sure that teaching philosophy aligns with who they are. Because as a faculty member interviewing a potential faculty member, I have to see if you fit. And I'm digressing, but as a chair of a dissertation, when people are choosing their topics, I often say, how do you see yourself fitting? Is that a topic that's going to get your foot in the door? Are people going to say, wow, that's really interesting. I see that they fit with us. So a little off topic, but still relevant. Bullet 2, scholarly evidence of your beliefs, right? Who are you at your core as an instructor? If you say that you're learner-centered in your classroom, you need to provide an example of that in the teaching philosophy. And again, you want to make sure this is not a lengthy essay. You want to be succinct. So you got to create those examples that are succinct, get to the point, and move on. So typically when you look online or if you look in books, people suggest anywhere between 100 to 1,000 words. I say no longer than 2 pages double spaced with your references at the bottom. You don't want to have a third reference page. So making it, and if you don't want to double space, go single space if you have a lot to say. But you want to make sure that it's not too lengthy that people are going to kind of tune out. Again, the last point being that it's fluid and it does change over time. Absolutely. I'm not the same instructor I was 18 years ago when I came to Robert Morris. So there's a couple schools of thought, two in particular, of teaching philosophy. Chisholm's is a little bit different than the other one I'm going to present to you. Both are fine. Neither one of them do you have to talk about in your teaching philosophy, but I think it helps frame how you attack this assignment. So the first component is conceptualization of learning. What do you as an instructor mean by learning? You want to make sure that you're describing, when you're talking about student learning and student outcomes, that you're describing that. What does the learning situation look like? Make sure you're using some sort of learning theory, some sort of conceptual framework, a theoretical framework that, for lack of a better word, frames that, when you write that. So make sure you have citation. The second component is, what do you mean by teaching? How do you facilitate that in your classroom? So part of that is thinking about the people who are sitting in front of you. So when those students come to you at 18, 19, 23, whatever it might be, how do you manage or meet the needs of diverse learners, academically challenged students, kids who aren't performing on, are performing, to what you believe they should be? How do you provide those accommodations? Yes, we have a Center for Student Success, and if a child has a documented disability, they can go there and they can, receive the accommodations that they are entitled to through the law. But we also have kids who have learning preferences and learning differences in our classroom who either don't have a documented disability or are too embarrassed to go and talk to the Center for Learning Success, or whatever the name may be at your university. So thinking about those students, I can tell you in my undergrad class, X number of students can do really well on a midterm or final, but when I take them in the field to teach, they struggle. Vice versa. I can think of one student in particular, phenomenal teacher. She's going to be tremendous, but she really struggles with testing situations. What can I do to help her be successful in those situations? Because I don't want to lose her as a teacher, especially during the teaching shortage. But more importantly, she's going to be dynamic and she's going to be who children need. So how can I help her? And not only help her peers, right? She's the one I know about. What about the other students sitting in the classroom? So I have lots of opportunities for them to be successful, and some will be more successful in more a field-based, hands-on, learning task, while others will do well with memorizing things for a test, memorizing facts. So thinking about what do you mean by learning, what do you mean by teaching. The third component is goals for students. So what do you expect kids to leave the classroom learning, right? What skills will they have? For me in an undergrad class, my students will be able to successfully teach phonics, phonemic awareness, comprehension, fluency, vocabulary. How? I'm going to tell you how I get them there, right? In my teaching philosophy. And why I believe that's true. The third goal, the rationale. Because this is situated in the science of reading, we know how children learn best through systematic explicit phonics or comprehension or vocabulary instruction. And I provide opportunities to teach them how to do that in an environment where they can fail. And it's, they're not going to all be perfect. They're going to fail. So when I think about learning theories or even the psychology behind it, zone of proximal development is an important part of what I do in my classroom. I'm there to support them until they can do it themselves. My job is to get them there. And how does that change over time? The fourth component is the implementation of the philosophy. So illustration of how one's concepts about teaching and learning are transformed into classroom activities, right? Here's my philosophy. Here's what it looks like in practice, right? Here's why. The second one, what's the rationale? Here's why I do it. So thinking about those sorts of things are an important part of it. Also, this fourth bullet, what do those relationships look like outside of the classroom? So for me, my students are able to contact me in a variety of means. They can email me, they can text me. Now, I don't mind them texting me, but I don't have to respond to them the minute they text. But I want them to know that if they're in the middle of this major assignment that is their field project and they have a question, they can text it to me. I'm happy to answer it. Even when they graduate, they'll text and say, hey, I got a grade, I got a job as a 5th grade teacher. Yay, congratulations. Hey, I had a baby. Yay, congratulations. Hey, can I use you as a reference? So, allowing students to have some sort of connection, and maybe you don't want them texting you all hours of the night. They don't. But if that's, not your gig, that's not what you like, you can use an app, right? These kids don't always check email. So maybe an app works better, like a Remind app or Team Reach or I'm being sports related here, but there are classroom ones that you can use. So thinking about, if I say my philosophy is that, I'm accessible to students, then I have to articulate what that means. When I say I'm accessible, what does that mean? Are they able to contact me? So talk about that. The fifth component is professional growth plan. So in that philosophy, talk about like kind of where you want to go and how you're going to get there, right? What's the path for you? All right. Now, the other framework for teaching philosophy is Goldwood and Alchins. So theirs is a little bit different. I don't think that it's, they all kind of cross over and seem, and have similarities. You don't have to use either. You can use a mixture of both. I just want you to really think about this when you sit down at the computer to draft this teaching philosophy, that you've thought about different ways of presenting this. So their first component is integration of responsibilities. So in higher ed, teaching, scholarship, research, service. They're saying that that is the main mission of university faculty. I would agree. Absolutely. Now, when you think about that triangle, how are those things integrated or how do they overlap? My teaching and my scholarship overlap a lot. So if you go to my ORCID number, the QR code, you'll notice a lot of my publications, you can see my students in those publications. Why? Well, because they're often my participants, right, or my respondents. But more importantly, it's what I'm interested in. That's what I teach. So that research drives my teaching, which helps me become a better teacher. Explicitly describe what you do to carry out these missions in your teaching philosophy. I would, in my teaching philosophy, if I'm kind of thinking about it from this standpoint, 3 sections: teaching, service, scholarship. There's no reason why you can't include the two, but keep in mind, I'm having you do a teaching philosophy, but I'm also having you do a research agenda. So those two pieces really serve nicely for a portfolio for teaching in higher ed. They suggest you put them together. I wouldn't necessarily do that if I have both. Number two, expertise. So link special knowledge or expertise in the field to ways of helping students learn the content, right? How is that part of the teaching learning process? I said earlier, my teaching drives my research drives my teaching. They are absolutely connected in so many ways. The work that I do with children who have learning differences absolutely drives my research. Because sometimes, sometimes there are times where I work with kids in the clinic and I'm like, oh man, this kid, he's got me stumped. I've never seen somebody make those miscues, those mistakes when reading, especially at his age. Well, that just gets my notebook out. It's my research notebook, and I jot down ideas. When I am doing work with undergrads, grads, doctoral students, young children, I'm constantly coming across problems, right? Which I don't have the answers to. I keep a research notebook, and I use that when I'm ready to sit down and do some research, right? Because we're so busy with our lives and work, but there are times, and I have to do research for my job. I'll say, okay, it's time, it's Christmas break. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to conceptualize a study, I'm going to go to my notebook, right? A lot of these problems or these topics have come from the work that I do in my classroom with my students. Third thing, relationship, right? So we know relationships are important to learning and to teaching. A book that I used to use years ago, it was called like it's the Teaching of Reading, and then the subheading was The Teacher Makes the Difference. Can't say it any better than that. The teacher makes the difference. And there's a lot of research around young children who perform better when they are taught by people that they like and who think that like them. So there's absolutely research behind that. I think it's an interesting topic. I might write that one in my notebook, that students perform better when they feel like they're in a caring, loving classroom. So thinking about how relationships work with your students, I think is important. And you can't be close to all of your students, right? I have very close relationships with my doctoral students where I chair their dissertation. We're very close, right? We text constantly. We're always on the phone. I have cohorts of reading specialists every year. I am their advisor, and I teach them for 4 classes in the program. We're very close. We have a group chat, right? We're constantly talking about things. We have a place where we put resources that we come across that we can all share. So thinking about what relationships look like, but do they play a vital part in your teaching? And how do you establish that, right? How do you establish rapport in your classroom? And are there things that you can do to build that rapport? Absolutely, I believe there are. All right, the learning environment, right? We know how important that is going to be in teaching in higher ed as it is in teaching anything. What does that look like, right? Socially for students, psychologically, physically, right? How the classrooms are set up. What do you believe helps students learn best? Because we want them to be learning the best that they can, right, to their potential. So describing that for the reader in your teaching philosophy can be helpful. And then methods, strategies, and innovation. And this is similar to the other framework earlier. What do? You say that this is what you believe. Then what do you do to make that true? Right? What are some of the strategies that you use in your classroom? And if you don't teach, you're being hypothetical in many regards, but the more you teach, the more that morphs over time. So like I may be able to give examples from a classroom now that I maybe before I taught I could. And then finally the outcomes. So kind of pausing here for a moment, in the syllabus assignment, I ask you to think about student outcomes, like here are your goals, here are the outcomes. So if you're saying, this is what I want students to accomplish, how do you prove that they accomplished that, right? What do you have in place that's going to help you determine if students learned what you wanted? So I want you to, take a moment, think about the teaching philosophy. If you go back to the syllabus, I have some questions for you to think about. They're not questions you have to answer per se, but it's things to think about, right? The environment, the tasks you ask students to do, the relationship building. I would say that relationships are a really important part of this. I'll give you an example. So I have my undergrads for 2 courses. Junior spring semester, I have them again fall senior senior year. Excuse me. When they come to me junior year, second semester, their junior year, for some reason they're deathly afraid of me. I have no idea. I don't know what they've heard. It's very hurtful. But they're often very afraid for some reason. And remember, Robert Morris is a small university, right? So students talk. So who knows why my reputation is that I'm tough out there. I don't like it. But typically, by the middle of the semester, inevitably, I will have students say, well, you're not as bad as I thought you were going to be, or I really enjoyed this class. I'm learning a lot. Or you're really tough, but I've learned a lot. So when I have them now coming in the fall, I have them coming up, it's a much different relationship, right? They're much more comfortable with me. They're willing to ask questions. They're willing to challenge things. And for me, I think that that's progress, right? I think that shows the relationship has developed over time. So I want you to sit down, think about this teaching philosophy, thinking about how you can say all of what you need to say in 2 pages and situate it in some learning theory or combination of learning theories, right? You don't have to strictly be in one school, right? Maybe you're like a Venn diagram with 5 circles. We'll talk through that, right? Give the reader a picture of who you are as a teacher or who you will be. So I will see you soon on another video, and I appreciate you listening. Thank you.